Bills Mafia. Tonight on the Air Raid Hour post-game show, we are diving into all things Bills Ravens. We've got the latest injury updates, major takeaways, and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is a breakdown you won't want to miss. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome into the Air Raid Hour presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at The Bills Guys. Joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills Guys, and Dave, we have the first therapy session of the 2024 season. For those of you who don't know, there's two types of Mondays here on the Air Raid Hour. There is Victory Monday, where we come together, we celebrate, we talk about all of the positives and maybe critique a thing or two here or there. And then there are the therapy sessions where we try to comfort one another, get us through the week and on to the Houston Texans. And there is a lot to be critical of about this game against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a therapy session. Things did not go well. You know, part of me almost feels like, would this have felt worse if it was like a close game and we lost? Is it better that we kind of got blown out? And there's just like, there was no shadow of a doubt of the outcome. And then does it matter that it was against like a really good team as opposed to like prior kind of losses we've had in early seasons past, where like, let's say the London game against Jacksonville or the Colts game from a couple years ago, or even the Jacksonville game from a couple years ago, Steelers, Jets from week ones of years past. So I don't know. For me, I'm not feeling as bad going out of this game into the next week, but there is a lot to clean up here. And the Bills still did end up losing by 25 points, something they haven't lost by more than 6 points in 44 games or something like that. So
43 games.
Yeah, a tough one right here. So yeah.
Some news and injuries. Khalil Shakir, Sean McDermott said today the Bills are going to monitor him in practice this week. He's dealing with an ankle injury. He got rolled up early in the first quarter. He was in a boot leaving the game last night, heading to the airport. So that is something to monitor, as the Buffalo Bills are not exactly deep at the wide receiver position. And
Right.
Taylor Rapp is in concussion protocol. If he doesn't clear, it is likely Cole Bishop will make his first career start this weekend versus the Houston Texans. Both things to monitor over the course of this week.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor Rapp, you saw the hit and you wondered, could it have been more than just a concussion? And like I say that with the utmost respect to what happened to him. It looked like he could have had even maybe a shoulder injury the way he went into to Derrick Henry on that. So a concussion for Taylor Rapp, probably going to be tough for him to get cleared in time. Short week as it is. It's likely going to be Cole Bishop. I liked some of the things I saw from Cole Bishop. Looked like he was one of the few people out there willing to kind of stick their nose in and make a tackle last night. But obviously a tall order for him, depending on what happens with this, not to get too far ahead, this Houston Texans injury report with their receivers, but that's a tall order for him coming up. But yeah, Khalil Shakir to me here is the big one, because you could tell even when he came back in the game, he had that ankle retape. He just didn't have that sort of same, like, I don't know what you would call it, like turning up the field ability, it seemed like, where he was like kind of catching the ball and the momentum was kind of taking him to the sideline or the boundary. He just didn't quite have that ability to cut up the field, it seemed like, after he caught the ball. And we know with him, yards after catch is huge. So him being able to plant and cut and do those things is going to be really important for him. It would not surprise me if for some reason he was not able to go in this one.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I think, the thing that I'm going to be taking the closest look at every single day when the injury report comes out for the Buffalo Bills. Like, was he limited? Was he full? Like, what are the reports? How did he look? Like, Khalil Shakir is an integral part to this Buffalo Bills offense. We spoke about it on the pregame show. Really, it looks like this offense is starting to be funneled between Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and James Cook, with everyone else sort of being the auxiliary pieces, even though it is sort of this selfless, everybody eats unless nobody eats style of offense for the Buffalo Bills. But back to the Taylor Rapp Cole Bishop situation, I got myself in a little bit of hot water on social media last night, which is not something that I normally do. I normally am very quiet and quaint and don't tick off anybody on social media. But I caught the ire of DeMar Hamlin's dad this morning. I don't know if you saw that. I wasn't even tweeting about DeMar Hamlin. I didn't even use his name, but I think the Buffalo Bills have an opportunity here. And Dave, I want to hear what you have to say. Let's just be real here, right? I'm a Bills fan. You're a Bills fan. If DeMar Hamlin turns into an all-pro and is a safety for the Buffalo Bills for the next 10 years and wins Super Bowls, no one will be happier than us, because we are Bills fans and we want the Bills to be successful. But the reality of the situation is DeMar Hamlin was never supposed to be the starting free safety of the Buffalo Bills. And you have a chance here, I think, after going and getting routed by the Baltimore Ravens, because it doesn't really look good doing it off of like 3 straight victories. You have a chance here to sort of maybe reset your safety position and go with Cole Bishop and go with Mike Edwards, the two guys who maybe I think most fans would have preferred be the 2 starting safeties when the season started. I think the Bills have an opportunity here to reset the safety position with Bishop and Edwards, and Rapp, when he comes back healthy, can fit in wherever you want to sort of fit him in. What are your thoughts on maybe the Buffalo Bills making a change back there? Not that they were the problem, because everyone was the problem this week, but an opportunity here after getting blown out to reset without really raising any eyebrows.
Well, this is the thing, the training camp situation with Mike Edwards' injury, I have to think played a role. And I'm not going to take away from what DeMar Hamlin did in training camp, because by all accounts, he did have a good training camp and probably performed better than maybe even the coaching staff had envisioned. I imagine during the summer, the plan was probably going to be to have Rapp and Edwards be your starters. You sign Mike Edwards, obviously, even before you drafted Cole Bishop, and you probably had planned on DeMar Hamlin playing that reserve safety role like he had been playing in prior years. If the Bills sort of saw this plan out, no injuries, I imagine they would have had Rapp and Edwards as their 2 starters, with Bishop as the rookie coming along behind and Hamlin as that reserve guy. And that would have been, I think, okay for a lot of people. Edwards has been successful in these types of systems with the Chiefs and with Tampa Bay. He's got a lot of experience. He's got playoff experience, Super Bowl experience, and you brought him in on a 1-year deal, ideally to kind of bridge that gap between whatever was coming between him and, I guess, Cole Bishop, let's say, down the road. But the injury to Mike Edwards, I think, threw a wrench into a lot of this. And then you also had the injury to Cole Bishop in training camp. So you end up with Rapp and Hamlin as your starters. And yes, you rally behind DeMar because, yes, he had a good training camp by all accounts, but I don't know that he is an above average caliber football player. We know what he is as a person, all that. That's fine, but we gotta separate that here from on the field. And I think on the field, he's an average, depth type of player, and that's not a knock on him at all, because that you need that type of player to fill out your roster. But I just don't think he is to the level of, I guess, what we would expect, especially coming off of Poyer and Hyde for all those years. And that's maybe unfair of us, but it's got to be a little bit better than it has been at this position.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Mike Edwards' resume, right? Of all of the safeties on the roster, we talked about this all training camp. He is the best, probably equipped to finger quotes center field. And, he missed all of the spring. He missed all of the summer. So now he's had multiple weeks now to get himself sort of ingrained and, initiate into this Buffalo Bills defense. Again, this just seems like a really decent time to go and put him in. A guy like Cole Bishop, he's got the highest ceiling of anybody. And if the Buffalo Bills are going to sort of be just surviving back there. You might as well try to just survive while giving the young guy with the highest upside some repetitions and let him grow into that position. So I do believe that change is necessary. And the Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott even talked today. They haven't closed the door on Micah Hyde, and there still could be a situation where Micah Hyde comes in here and we're having like Taylor Rapp, Micah Hyde at some point during the season with Bishop, Edwards, and Hamlin in reserve roles.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. And I mean, look, again, I said kind of going into the 53-man roster predictions, like I think if you're Micah Hyde, you didn't want this to be the case, right? You were waiting for like the playoffs maybe or late in the season so that you come back kind of like for that ride into the sunset. I don't know that Micah Hyde was ready for like 15 to 18 games, right? So, I mean, I think the Bills will have a chance, like you said, to maybe reset this position now. Short week, tough to kind of turn around, go on the road to Houston against that receiving core. But the NFL waits for no one. So the Bills will have to figure this out in 6 short days here.
Before we get into our one big thing this evening, this episode is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 convenient locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Picasso's Pizza has been serving Buffalo's best pizza since 1980. Whether you're a local or across the country, you can enjoy their delicious pizza delivered fresh to your door. Visit picassospizza.net to place your order today. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, on to our one big thing. In comment section, let us know what your one big thing is. There are probably a dozen things that we can talk about coming out of this Bills-Ravens game. Dave, I'll start with you, and then I'll scan the comment section here. What is your one big takeaway from this football game?
Oh, man. I think my takeaway is that, the NFL will humble you. And I think these coordinators were both riding high, I think, through the first 3 games. And Sean McDermott maybe even include him in that. But these 2 new coordinators, Joe Brady and Bobby Babich, I think had a lot of juice, had a lot of momentum through the first 3 games, talking these guys up, brought a new energy. And I still think for the long game, they are in a really good position and they are going to be successful and will continue to be successful. And one bad game doesn't make that. We've seen guys like Andy Reid, even as a head coach and calling plays, like have bad games. We've seen defensive coordinators have bad games. So I think my one big thing is like for these 2 young coordinators is I'm not going to overreact. I'm going to think about the long term here. I'm going to think about in years past when Super Bowl caliber teams like the Patriots and the Chiefs have had early season losses against teams that maybe weren't even as good as this Ravens team that the Bills just lost to. And that famous sort of on to Cincinnati quote Bill Belichick said when the Patriots lost in embarrassing fashion early in the season that year, and they go on and they rip off like whatever it was, however many wins. So I think for me, my one big thing is to not overreact and not get too emotional about this loss early in the season, playing a really good team. These 2 coordinators, it's a good learning moment for both of them, kind of their first full years as coordinators for this team. Bobby Babich, first time as a coordinator. So I guess my one big thing is let the coordinators learn from this and not to overreact too much to an early season loss. Easier said than done. I agree.
Yeah, I echo your statement there of not going to overreact or make any grand statements. But looking at this game in isolation, I'm right there with you. My biggest takeaway was I feel like the Buffalo Bills coaching staff did not have this football team prepared to go out there and do what they needed to do to beat that specific Ravens opponent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I'm not blaming the players. Like they deserve a slice of this blame pie too. But I just really was not impressed with this week 4 game plan. All 3 coaches, Sean McDermott, Joe Brady, Bobby Babich. I mean, if you're Sean McDermott, you dictated the way this game would be played on the first offensive series with the decisions that you made. You're going to be aggressive on 4th and 1 from well within your own territory, but 4 plays later, you won't do the same on 4th and 2 from midfield. And Dave, we talked all pregame about how punting and pinning deep and kicking field goals were not wins when you're playing a team like the Baltimore Ravens. And what does Sean McDermott do? He tries to punt and pin deep. The next thing you know, first play, boom, Derrick Henry runs 87 yards, and the Buffalo Bills are now playing from a deficit for the rest of the football game. Then again in the
No, go ahead.
Then again in the second half, down 11. You punt again on 4th and short when you have an opportunity to maybe get back into the football game. Plan timid, play timid. And I think the Buffalo Bills embodied that.
I mean, timid, great word choice, scared, however you want to talk about it. I think Aaron Schatz did a really nice thread today about like marquee games and McDermott being a little bit more conservative and the data showing that in bigger, more marquee games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand some of the decision making. I feel like it was coaching scared, it was coaching timid, whatever you want to call it, and that kind of reflected then down onto the play, right on the field. Players playing timidly, business decisions being made. Like you can talk about how good he is as a corner, but Rasul Douglas wanted no business on some of these run plays trying to make a tackle. Like I'll just say it. You can watch the all 22 and see it for yourself. And there were only a few guys that really looked like they wanted to be there making tackles. Dorian Williams being one of them, Cole Bishop being another. And so to me, like that's a reflection, I think, on the preparation from the week, like you said, the coaching staff, which is a little bit shocking, to be honest, especially maybe not Sean McDermott, shocking from Sean McDermott, because that's kind of like been his Achilles heel, I would say, is like these types of situations. He hasn't been great. But Bobby Babich, it's a little surprising, maybe because it was his first like maybe big, huge game. There was a little of that, but like that's not what we hear from practice, right? That's not what we saw in training camp. So for that, I think it's maybe part of that, but also I think that defense was shell shocked after that first Henry touchdown run. And after that, it was just like, we don't want to give up another one of those. So we're going to like be super cautious. And when you play like that, it's not usually going to lead to good things. So,
yeah. And you mentioned Bobby Babich here, and Walter S. comes in with a great statistic. He says, when a team is averaging over 5 yards rushing before contact, I don't care if you have Hall of Famers back there, you're going to struggle. 100%, Walter. I mean, Bobby Babich, you saw what Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson did just 1 week previous to the Dallas Cowboys. You saw it with your own 2 eyes. I know the Buffalo Bills and that coaching staff watched that football game probably a couple of times over. And you watch that football game and your plan is to come out and just do what you always do against the Baltimore Ravens and hope that your backups that are playing for all your injured all pros can just step in and do what those injured all pros typically do for you. To me, that's bad strategy. Everything that this defense did against the Baltimore Ravens seemed reactive, not proactive. Outside of the first couple of drives after the half, that was the only time where it really looked like the Buffalo Bills defense was ahead of the curve or playing proactively. I mean, it didn't look like they planned to play single high. They were forced to. It didn't look like they planned to get into a 43 base. They were forced to. Everything they did seemed like that was dictated to them by the Baltimore Ravens. They weren't dictating to the Baltimore Ravens. So, yeah, Bobby Babich, got to be better. Got to learn from this experience. And there are plenty of offenses that we're going to play this year that can run the football. San Francisco, Detroit, etc. Maybe not to the level or to the extremes the Baltimore Ravens can with Lamar and Derrick Henry back there, but we got to be better prepared for that.
Yeah, I mean, and Joe Mixon may be back for the Texans this week with that ankle injury, so that's going to be a tall order for the Bills if that's the case. So, yeah, like I said, in the one big thing when we first started the conversation, got to learn from this if you're the two coordinators. And Sean McDermott really, I think, like it might be this is what he is at this point. Like we're 8 years in to the Sean McDermott era. Like this could end up being something that as great as he has been for this team, like, yes, people want to say, oh, like Andy Reid didn't win, his first Super Bowl till he went to a different, like, and all this stuff. And I get that, but like, he's got to show me at least once or twice in some of these situations that he can rise to the occasion. And to this point, he really hasn't shown that.
One last final thought here, because like I said, I think it was a total systems failure. And Justin Tyndall, thank you for your super chat. We're going to get to that in a moment as well. I mentioned Bobby Babbage. I mentioned Sean McDermott. I got to mention Joe Brady as well, because neither Joe Brady, Josh Allen, the offensive line, nobody seemed to have an answer for those Baltimore Ravens pressure packages. It took way too long to find any answers, even if you would even consider what the Buffalo Bills came up with to be answers to the way that they were playing them yesterday. It took way too long to start attempting to push the ball down the field. And then you finally have like a glimmer of hope. Your offense is moving the ball pretty decently well. You have a nice big chunk completion to Coleman, 2 big runs by James Cook, and you decide to pull that trick play out of the bag. And I hesitate to even call it a trick play, because who were you trying to fool? Because everybody knew who was going to get the football. It was going to be Josh Allen. It was pretty easy for the Baltimore Ravens to defend that. It didn't even look like the offensive line was prepared to run that play that the Buffalo Bills, hopefully I'd assume, had practiced over the course of that week. And it just put us right back in the same hole and killed any chance we had to come back. So just from the top down, the game plan this week was not great.
No, and I mean, like, I get Joe Brady came on and like took the accountability on himself today, which, as a young coordinator, like, good on him to do that. Wasn't too really happy with how Sean McDermott kind of deflected the trick play question back to his coordinator. Like,
I wasn't even happy. I wasn't even happy with the way he answered the 4th and 2 from midfield question too. Like,
yeah, he was pretty salty still, it seemed like, but like, yeah, I don't know. Who knows? It's funny. Hadn't really thought about this, but like, down the road, could you see a scenario where like one of these guys takes over as I'm not even gonna go there. But yes, on to Houston. One big thing. Yep, Justin Tyndall with the super chat here. I'm over Hollins and MVS. Hollins had 11 targets, 4 catches, 46 yards. MVS 6 targets, 2 catches, 26. That is 17 targets, 6 catches for 72 yards. Want targets going to Shakir, Kincaid, Coleman, Samuel. And that was something Joe Brady mentioned, right, in the press conferences, finding ways to get Samuel the ball more than he has been, because you're paying this guy a lot of money and he really isn't doing much for you so far.
Yeah, I struggled to answer this question, because my biggest answer to this question is big picture, right? Because in a perfect world, I don't think this is the receiving core the Buffalo Bills would have wanted to bring into the 2024 NFL season. I don't, right? Like, to me, you have Shakir and Samuel, who are sort of those like inside outside playmakers you can get the ball to. They can be your yak guys. Khalil Shakir is turning into a really nice safety blanket. You got your contested catch, get after it in the run game guys like Keon Coleman, and then Matt Collins would be like the secondary backup / special teams / depth version of that. The one position where the one guy that really just sticks out like a sore thumb is MVS, right? Like, if there was a better receiver in MVS's slot on the roster, then Matt Collins would move down a spot. Then more things would be available to Keon Coleman and to Khalil Shakir and to Curtis Samuel. But the Buffalo Bills, I think monetarily, were just strapped because of all the dead cap they had to eat for Stephon Diggs, just probably not assuming that they were going to trade Stephon Diggs when the offseason began. So to me, it's just survive, get through it, figure it out, just like the Kansas City Chiefs had to survive, get through it, figure it out when they had to trade Tyreek Hill a couple of years ago, and then reset in the offseason, because the top 4 guys I like Shakir, even though he hasn't really lived up yet. I like Curtis Samuel. I like Matt Collins as a 4th or a 5th guy. I like Keon Coleman as a niche jump ball, get after it in the run game, red zone, just type of like, I don't think he's ever going to be more than a depth receiver. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but I think he can be a very good depth receiver. And by depth, I mean like a 2nd or 3rd guy. Go and add like a legit, I don't even want to say number 1 receiver, but just a guy who can do multiple things and has some speed and can get down the field. You add that in place of MVS, and it's a pretty solid receiving core, but you're just not going to get that until 2025. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, Walter raises a point that I've been kind of making on this show for a couple weeks now, and it's been a little bit more hypothetical, but we saw it come kind of true last night, right? And this was like, we don't have an alpha. That maybe means like there's not an ego in the room that demands the ball, but will
Mhm.
that also mean guys shrink in the moment because no one's really that type of guy, and no one's really expecting that to be themselves? And we've kind of put that on Shakir so far this year, rightfully so. He's been our best receiver, but Kincaid needs to be that guy. They were getting him involved early, and then after that drop, they kind of like went away from him. Was kind of unfortunate, right? Because they were, we said in the pregame, like Kincaid, like Bowers had a good game against this Ravens defense. Ferguson had a good game against this Ravens defense. Kincaid started out well, and then just after that drop, they just went away from it. And so, like, who is going to be that guy that can step up in crunch time as a pseudo alpha game to game, right?
Mhm.
And we just like, I don't know. Like Samuel's getting paid like he should be the guy. Kincaid's the first round draft pick, but like who is it going to be? Like I don't know.
And we got Brian Bowers coming in saying, well, if Coleman's only a depth receiver, then we shouldn't have taken him in the second round. Maybe I was bad with the way I worded that, right? Like I don't think Keon Coleman is a X alpha watt. Like I don't think Keon Coleman's going to turn into Nico Collins. I don't I don't think you're going to get that from Keon Coleman. But I think he can be a T Higgins or a T Higgins light, but T Higgins is not the number one receiver in Cincinnati, right? It's Jamar Chase. And I also think if you take Jamar Chase away, T Higgins is probably not going to be as explosive as T Higgins is. I always think Keon Coleman is going to be a guy who has to play off other guys. I think he's going to be a part of the equation. I don't
I
think
think
he's going
that's
to
a
ever
good
be
comparison.
the equation,
Mhm.
right? So maybe I worded that poorly. Because I am very high on Keon Coleman, and we'll talk about Keon Coleman later when we talk about he shows up in my positives and in my negatives because he had a really big drop, but then he responded really nicely. So we're going to
Mhm.
get to that in one moment. But before we do that, we got to look at our weekly data. And for the first time this
Mm.
season, the data is not so pretty. Two statistics we track every week here at the Air Raid Hour: the complimentary football, time of possession, average starting field position, turnovers, and we track toxic differential, 10 plus yard runs, 15 plus yard runs, and turnovers. Complimentary football. The Ravens won time of possession 31-29, essentially. They just eked out the Buffalo Bills. Average starting field position, the Ravens started on average at the 39. They were actually pinned pretty relatively deep a number of times, but still managed to score on almost all those possessions where they were pinned deep. Just a brutal showing from the Buffalo Bills defense. The Bills' average starting field position was the 30-yard line, 9 yards behind the Baltimore Ravens, despite all the times that they were pinned back. So the Ravens won average starting field position. They won time of possession, and turnovers were split. So the Buffalo Bills are still 3-0 this season when winning this complimentary football differential, but they are now 0-1 when
Mhm.
losing this complimentary football differential.
Yeah, and I mean, diving into it even further, right? The Ravens 5 for 9 on third downs. 3 of those conversions were of 10 plus yard conversions. I mean, those are just backbreakers in a game like this, right? In the run, the toxic differential, when you have 5 toxic differential run plays, that really is not
Mhm.
something you hear a lot of in the NFL over the past several seasons now. The NFL is kind of going back to being a little bit more run centric this year, which is interesting. And the Ravens maybe ahead of the curve a little bit on that front. They're going to be a tough offense to contend with all year. That toxic differential on the
Mhm.
running plays,
Yeah.
like for the Bills to not even have one. Look, Ravens came as number one run defense. I get that, but like to not even have one with James Cook, rough night there.
Mhm. And the Bills actually had more explosive plays in the passing game than the Baltimore Ravens did. The Ravens only
Yeah.
had two passes of 15 plus yards, where the Buffalo Bills ended up having three. The turnovers were equal, but those 10 plus yard runs were the difference. I mean,
Yep.
the Bills were -4 in toxic differential. They're now 3-0 on the season when winning toxic differential, and 0-1 when losing toxic differential. So there's a reason why we track these statistics. There's a reason why we track this complimentary football. There's a reason why we track this toxic differential, because the Buffalo Bills are 3-0 when winning these things, and they are now 0-1 when losing these things. So these are the things that win you football teams or football games, and that is how you play all three phases: complimentary football, And the Buffalo Bills certainly did not do that against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, on to stock up. And this is really where we give our positive takeaways from the game. Dave, what juice can we squeeze out of this one? Like, what are the positive takeaways that we can have?
I'll squeeze a little juice out of Dorian Williams. I know he got
Mhm.
beat on that play where Justice Hill scored the touchdown, and there are like maybe one or two linebackers that could hang with Justice Hill on that route. Maybe not even Milano. Like any linebacker matched up with Justice Hill in that situation probably would have gotten beat to that corner of the end zone. But Dorian Williams to me showed a lot of heart. He showed a lot of effort. He seemed like he was one of the few guys willing to come up and stick his pads in to Derrick Henry. Made a lot of plays in the running game. And I thought that Dorian Williams, as a downhill tackling, run fitting linebacker, played a good game and showed that he didn't care if it was Derrick Henry or whoever. He was going to come in and try to make a play. So I know overall the defense really got torched in this game, and the
Mhm.
stats don't look great. Obviously, on the rushing D, gave up 8 yards per rush and 270 rushing yards. But Dorian Williams, I thought, showed a flicker of positivity for the defense in this game. I liked what I saw from him. So that's where I'll start with my stock up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I have in my notes for Dorian Williams. He seemed like one of those guys who made mistakes, but over the course of the game was learning from those mistakes. So if you're going to lose, you might as well learn while you're losing. And Dorian Williams, I think, did some learning while the Buffalo Bills were losing. To a lesser extent, I think Balin Spector did as well.
Mhm.
There were a couple of plays in the second half where I think he was much improved from the first half. And I like this comment here from Chop in 1975. That Carter kid from Duke was getting after it at the end of the game. I
Yep.
loved Dwayne Carter. I loved his attitude at the end of the game. I loved some of those run defensive reps he had late in the game. I like the fact that Cole Bishop was getting some reps late in that game. So our second and our third round pick getting to see the field, getting to play some reps, showing some juice. I think that's a positive takeaway from this football game, because I think as the season progresses, both of those guys are going to be possibly key elements to what the Buffalo Bills have to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, this is going to make some people sick, but there's really not a lot of positives we have in this game. But I mean, I will say this: Sam Martin continues to punt well for this team. I mean, I look. You said, is there any juice we can squeeze out of this? And I'm trying to squeeze some juice here.
Mhm.
6 punts for 289 yards, had 2 inside the 20, had a long of 59, average of 48.2. The Ravens really didn't have anything to return in the punt game. They had 3 returns for 34 yards from Hardy, which was pretty de minimis. And so, look, Sam Martin, like, good game from him.
Mhm.
Another positive, I suppose.
Chop in 1975 comes in and says Josh had a cool throw to Shakir. Yep. Like that. That
Yeah.
was a cool play
Yeah.
that he made. I know the typical social media follows, the guys who have, supported Josh from day one and continue to support Josh. People like Nate Tice, people like Mina Kimes. They were all over that one, talking about what a freak of nature Josh Allen is, his ability to make that kind of throw. And, even people like Ben Solak, guys whose opinions I really trust on quarterback play, were like, Josh Allen probably had one of his worst games of his pro career, maybe the worst game of his pro career, if you take out his rookie season and games like he had against the Packers, his rookie season, etc. Like, he might have had one of his worst games of his career, and it still wasn't that bad of a game for Josh Allen. So like, if that's the worst Josh Allen is going to look, like, that shows you why he's one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. I had Keon Coleman in the positive section. We'll talk about the drop when we get to the negative takeaways. That was a bad drop. I think Benjamin Solak, who I just mentioned, did a really good breakdown on X, showing exactly what was maybe going through Keon Coleman's head. He tried to catch it one way, and then it looked like halfway as the ball was coming, he tried to readjust and catch it a different way. And that's what sort of caused him to not be able to secure that football. That's a catch you got to have. We're going to talk about that in the negative takeaways. It's exactly what you're brought in for. But again, there is no losing if you're learning. And the Buffalo Bills, whether it's Dwayne Carter and Cole Bishop getting those reps, whether it's Dorian Williams, who's probably going to play a big role in this football team this year, learning from his mistakes, Keon Coleman bounced back from that big drop. 3 catches, 51 yards after that. Really, 2 really nice back shoulder catches from Josh Allen. And if the Buffalo Bills can have that throw in their bag for the rest of the season as something that they can go to when they're stuck, that's a really nice thing to have.
Yeah, and I mean, I know he's not the caliber of a Devontae Adams, but though some of those couple of those back shoulders throws looked very Rodgers to Devontae Adams-esque from years past. And so, yes, he dropped that one. That would have been a huge play, but he really looked pretty smooth on the other two, the other two back shoulder ones, and especially the one where he kind of caught the ball while he was spinning to kind of shield himself from the defender as he kind of spun from his left to his right. I mean, look, you could say like, well, Josh was just trying to make a play and he trusted the guy, or you could say like, look, he was just trying to make a play because the Bills desperately needed something and he was going to throw that direction no matter what, because that's just the state we were in the game. Either way, Keon Coleman came up with the play. And so, look, I think overall it was a net positive for him. People will talk about the drop, but he did have two really nice catches. So it's something to build on, right? It's something to build on for him.
All right. Well, let's get into this final segment here. Stock down or our negative takeaways. And we say this because we love you, Buffalo Bills. We're gonna give you some criticisms here, and we're gonna talk about some things that we need to work on. Let's start with the offense, because one of the things, and we already sort of mentioned Josh Allen, Joe Brady, the offensive line, their inability to find an answer for Baltimore's pressure packages, the game script, it just was not great. But how about some of our players in big moments not meeting the moment? You have Kincaid's drop on the first drive on the 3rd and 2. You have Coleman's drop when the Buffalo Bills have a chance to score before the half, knowing the Baltimore Ravens are getting the ball back on the other end of that half. And then when you finally have a chance to cut it to 21-17, you're driving down the field, you don't run that trick play properly. Even though the trick play was a bad call, we've talked about that. The Bills also just did not execute that. If you go back and look at some of the stills where all the offensive linemen were standing as that play was progressing, was awful. So in the biggest moments, Kincaid, Coleman, the offensive line, they shrunk.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall stock down the trenches, right? Just as a whole, like offensive line. Actually thought they did an okay job run blocking in this game. Like James Cook looked like he was chipping away, and like they were getting some decent runs in there. I mean,
they just had to stop running.
Yeah, he averaged 4.3 a carry, right? I mean, he didn't have anything longer than 8 yards, but like he was consistently getting, 4 yards a carry. But pass blocking was rough. They didn't have an answer for the blitz packages. On the defensive trenches, I mean, getting pushed around in the run game, that goes without saying. 270 rushing yards. Really couldn't get a hand on Lamar. I did think that there was quite a bit of holding happening that they could have called a few different times that they didn't. That's just what it is. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the officiating because that has no bearing whatsoever on the outcome of this game. But man, that was rough to see in the trenches. Both sides of the ball, the trenches were underwhelming for a team that through 3 games that had been a big positive for them.
DTV comes in and says Keon should be getting more playing time than MVS and Hollins. He did, though. Like, I mean, Keon Coleman once again led the Bills in snaps. So he is getting the most playing time of any wide receiver on the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, you mentioned it. We run the ball well, but the inability to maintain a balance and to be able to have the run game to fall back on. Yeah. The game script got out of hand, and the Buffalo Bills had to get into a spread offense, something that, like I just mentioned at the top of the show, we're probably a receiver away from being able to be an offense that can consistently do that. Do I think the Bills could survive here and there or have it as a tool in their toolbox to utilize? Yeah. But when you have to do it play after play after play, the Bills just don't have the dogs. And you could see the receivers were struggling to get separation. And I sort of push back on social media against the people who are like, Josh Allen doesn't have enough weapons. This is trash, blah, blah. You can survive with what they have. You can. But in a game where another team jumps out to a giant lead on you and you're forced to do the same thing over and over again, and there is no variance to what you can do, yes, our receivers are suspect. Yes, they will struggle to get separation. But here's the thing. Last year, Ken Dorsey was trying to run that offense every week with similar personnel. At least Joe Brady's only doing it out of desperation. And I think this offseason we will address that, and we will go and we will try to add another receiver who can make us be able to do that a little bit more effectively. But the Bills have the dudes to survive in the 2024 NFL and do the things they need to do, but they can't get thrown in to situations like they did against the Baltimore Ravens consistently. That will be trouble, because they really did struggle to push the ball down the field.
Yeah, and I just put a comment in because people talk about this defensive line sort of no showing in some of these moments. And I'll say this the way this defense is constructed schematically, physically, the personnel they have, stylistically, this defense is built to have a play with a lead, right? Like this is their best match for how they play stylistically is playing with a lead, not having to stop 35 rushes a game, getting after the passer, getting in long down and distances, being able to rally and tackle it from zone coverage to force punts and force shorter possessions. But this defense is really not built to defend the run all game long. And I hate to say that, but it's true. Like in just the downhill aggressive nature, the size being a little bit undersized, like that's just what we are. And so when it gets out of hand like this against a Ravens team, then it's really hard to recover. And we saw this happen in the Bengals playoff game a couple years ago with Joe Mixon, and we've seen it happen at other times. Jonathan Taylor did this to us a couple years back, but yeah, this team really needs to play with a lead, I think, to be optimally designed.
Charles G comes in and says, have you all seen what the Commanders are doing with far less talent? I would push back a little bit on what I think you're insinuating here. I don't think what the Commanders are doing is more impressive than what the Buffalo Bills have done. Like, they just happened to, their bad week was week 1, and then they beat up on the New York Giants, even though that was mostly field goals, right? They couldn't get into the end zone. It was all field goals against the Bengals, whose defense, even the Carolina Panthers and Andy Dalton were putting up points on that Bengals defense. They're not what something's run amok with that Bengals defense. And then the Cardinals defense, who the Buffalo Bills carved up once they got, their bearings after not playing together all training camp. The Bills carved up that Cardinals defense, just like the Commanders carved up that defense. I think what the Commanders are doing are impressive, but I think it's important to have perspective. Cliff Kingsbury was doing some very impressive things in Arizona, and then people figured him out and he started playing real defenses. And next thing you know, he's fired. Right. So yes, the Commanders are off to a hot start, but I wouldn't say they're more impressive than the Buffalo Bills. I think you're going to need a bigger sample size from both before we get into sort of commentary like that. You mentioned the defensive side of the ball. The pass rush was non-existent. The line was bullied, as you mentioned. But Eric and Anthony kind of pointed out, like, again, going back to the coaching staff, like, was the game planning bad? Because Eric and Anthony pointed out, like, it seemed like the Baltimore Ravens knew exactly what the Buffalo Bills were going to do as a defense, try to get up the line of scrimmage quickly. And they sort of took advantage of that. And the Buffalo Bills just never adjusted. So if you're a player and you're being told to do something and the other team is torching you because you're doing that thing, but the coaches aren't telling you to do something different, is that really the player's fault? I don't know.
I mean, like Bruce does that plurality pie, right? Where he kind of divides up the blame for certain things. And I think it's like, there's a lot of blame to go around for this, right? Is it game plan, lack of adjustments? This team kind of has had issues with like making adjustments by and large, like over the last 7-8 years. Like in the Sean McDermott era, adjustments haven't been the forte really of this team, right? It's just one of those things. And I think when things snowball and you have these two young coordinators, like, I think we were on tilt, man. I really do. After that Henry touchdown run, like even watching the game, hearing the crowd, especially with this game being on the road as well, I think it might have been a little bit different if this was at home and you kind of had like a little bit more of like, okay, that's silenced the crowd initially. You could have got a little bit more momentum back. But like with that happening on the road, that defense shell shocked from that run, I think things just snowballed from there. I mean, that is a very rare play in the NFL, a long touchdown run on one play. So, yeah, I think that has something to do with it as well.
And Charles G, spot on, right? The rushing yards before contact is most definitely an issue. It was pointed out to us by Adam, our guy here at Cover One, our analytics guy here at Cover One, right? At Oliver and Daquan Jones, the advanced data is showing that they're not really like pressuring the passer at the rates that they typically do. That's concerning. They have to step it up with their interior pressure. And Von Miller only played 9 snaps. And Sean McDermott was asked after the game, why did Von Miller only play 9 snaps? And Sean McDermott's like, well, he's got our third down specialist, and we never got them to third down. Like that was essentially his answer.
Like 3 times they had third and long the whole game.
So just a total systems failure from the Buffalo Bills defensive line, and a number of people with a rather pointed joke that the Buffalo Bills defensive line was confused. They thought it was January.
Yeah, I saw Nate Geary said that too. So you get stereotypes, like,
yeah,
there's
until you prove them wrong. You prove them wrong. Am I right? Yeah. The secondary, yikes! Like Benford, Douglas, they still did their thing on the boundary, like they do. You mentioned their issues in tackling, just poor communication, dropping back into zone, poor tackling. This defense completely gave up the middle of the field. They completely gave up the underneath. They had no answer for misdirection. It's the exact opposite of smart, fast, physical. They were disjointed, they were slow, and they were weak. The biggest play that sticks out to me in the game, and it's a rather it's a smaller play. Like it wasn't even a big play that stuck out in the game. And Dave, let me know if you remember this play. I don't even remember if Nelson Aguilar caught the ball or not. I think he might have. Lamar Jackson threw a ball into the zone.
It was like a 3rd and 14.
Yeah,
that one.
He caught it, right?
Yeah, he caught it. Yeah.
He throws the ball, and I thought Cam Lewis was going to pick it off, or I thought he was going to knock the ball away. But it was almost like basketball when one player is just standing there staring at the ball, and the other player decides he's actually going to go attack the ball. Nelson Aguilar attacked the ball and went for the ball, and Cam Lewis just kind of stood there and waited for the ball to come to him. And to me, that was just symbolic of the entire night. Disjointed, slow, and weak. That's what the Buffalo Bills secondary was for a majority of the night. And I feel like that Nelson Aguilar catch just sort of exemplified that. And it just was not a banner night for Cam Lewis.
No, Cam Lewis struggled. I mean, there was another play where Nelson Aguilar almost made a spectacular one-handed catch, and like Rasul Douglas was kind of like waiting for it to fall into his lap instead of, I mean, understandably, like not going after the ball, but like I really thought they were going to convert that one too for a second. It has been really bad. But to me, those 3 different 3rd and 10 plus conversions were just backbreakers on a team that was already struggling for any kind of momentum. Like you weren't really, you had the backbreaker like trick play on offense, and then you had those 3 3rd and 10 pluses that you gave up, and like you just, I mean, those are just killers, man, just absolute killers.
Special teams, Codrington had a muff. He did a really good job, I think, recovering it. He'll get a pass. At least I hope he gets a pass, and because he's been pretty explosive for the Buffalo Bills, and he's been good. We'll give him a pass for that one. But Tyler Bass,
God, man,
this is your fault for tweeting that. Must have felt good for Tyler Bass knocking down that 50.
But you know what? I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one.
But like, I'll tell you what. Like, this is where I was mentally during this game. When he lined up to kick that field goal, I was sitting on my couch, and my wife had just took the daughter upstairs to sort of put her to bed. And I was watching Tyler Bass line up, and I'm like, he's not making this. He's going to shank the shit out of this ball. Like, I just knew. I knew. And I think if everyone at home is being honest with themselves, everyone else probably knew too, that there was no chance in hell he was making that field goal. And sure enough, what does he do? He just absolutely shanks it. I have not had a chance to watch the full interviews today. I've only seen clips. I don't know if anyone brought up Tyler Bass. That's something to follow over the course of the week, because we know the Bills worked out kickers last week. I might be done with him. Like, I might be done.
I mean, it's a tough situation, right? Because as
money, stop paying kickers.
The money, and he's got the good leg that you would want in a place like Buffalo, right? To kick in like but man, like
Chuck Knobloch, man,
the fall from grace, right?
He's got the yips.
Like, he's got those mental demons, man. And as a kicker, it's like, that's all you've got, right? Like you don't have other play. It's not like you're a corner, and if you give up like a long passing play, you're right back out there for the next play to like kind of, you forget about it. Like you miss a kick that stays with you, and you just stew on it, right? For like hours, days, potentially, right? If you don't kick again. So that's tough. He has really not shown that he's going to be consistent this year, but as Pop says in the chat, what kicker available is better? I don't know, right? I don't know that there
I don't
is.
know. Yeah, don't get me wrong. We're not here with solutions. We're just here to complain.
I don't know that. I don't have a solution, Pops. I really don't. And I don't think the Bills really do have a like. You're not
Mhm.
going to bring Anders Carlson in, who also has shown that he
Can't make extra
struggled.
points.
Yeah,
He can't
he
make
struggled.
extra points.
Like the Packers got rid of him, right, for a rookie this year.
Who
Like
sucks? No offense to your wolf pack.
oh, Haverstick.
Yeah.
I mean, look. Hey, Stephen Hauschka was a Wolfpack kicker, and he was pretty damn good. So
Until Harry Anderson decided to end his career.
oh yeah.
Final thoughts here. I'll say this: despite all the stuff that went on over the course of that football game, there was a point in the third quarter where we legitimately could have made the game 21-17. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens were just asking for it. John Harbaugh calling multiple timeouts, Lamar Jackson turning the ball over. I mean, they were literally asking for the Buffalo Bills to come back. And that's another thing that's just rather disappointing, that the Buffalo Bills couldn't pull the trigger and at least close it to a 4-point game and see what they could do from there.
Well, that was the dagger. Like I texted the group chat we have with you and Casey and Nat. Like I was like, that it's over after that. I mean, the Bills had a little bit of momentum at that point, right? It was 21-10. They were past midfield or right around midfield. I don't remember exactly where they were, but I think they were past midfield, if I'm not mistaken. And who knows, 21-17, that defense had come out in the second half and had some juice. And like, you don't know, like the Bills offense scores there, that maybe that defense like keeps that juice and like they're fired up. You just don't know, right? So it's, ifs and buts, whatever, but like you just don't know what's going to happen in the 21-17 game. Baltimore but made the play when they needed to. The Bills came up small in that moment, and obviously Joe Brady took that accountability today. I don't think you're going to see a play like that called for some time from this.
This ends the streak of 43 games where the Buffalo Bills lost by 6 points or less, an NFL record, one that I think is going to be a long time held by the Buffalo Bills. What they did was rather impressive. I mean, this is a football team that just does not get blown out. And silver lining, the last loss the Buffalo Bills had in the regular season that was this bad was the Colts ground and pound trouncing, awfully similar to the ground and pound trouncing that we got today back in the 2021 season. And the end result of that season was maybe the closest most fans felt like the Buffalo Bills have ever been to Super Bowl in the Josh Allen era. Even though the season previous they had made it to the AFC Championship game, the year we got trounced by the Colts, that was the 13-2 year where our offense was absolutely humming
Just
by
dialed.
the time they made it to the postseason. So learn from your mistakes, have a better plan for when or if you see the Baltimore Ravens again in January, because they match up in a not so pleasant way. And hey, as Josh Allen said, good thing it happened early, right? You're not going to go 17-0. Good thing it happened early. Good thing it didn't happen to the Jets, the Dolphins, or the Patriots. That would stink. And if you're gonna win, if you're gonna lose one of these three, I'd rather lose to Lamar than Stephon Diggs or Aaron Rodgers in the New York Jets.
Yeah,
The Buffalo Bills got to dial it back in for the next 2 weeks here.
Yeah, and the Jets pulled a Jets, lost to the Bo Nix-led Broncos, who only threw for like 50 yards in the game. The Pats lost, and it looks like the Dolphins on their way to losing. So as they say, no blood maybe this week.
Yeah.
If all AFC East teams lose.
Pops Mafia says, any thoughts on the Texans game? Not so much yet. I mean, obviously we will be back on Sunday at 8 a.m. for our pregame show. I will say they've looked a little disjointed without Joe Mixon and without Dameon Pierce. So let's, fingers crossed, hope that those two are out again.
Tank Dell too, right? Didn't play this last
Tank Dell
game,
didn't play in the last game, but he should be back for this game. So they'll have their full repertoire of receivers. And if Joe Mixon's back, I think the Houston Texans will be a little bit closer to back. I don't think people are really talking about the Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce injuries enough. I
That
mean,
Joe
they were
Mixon
rolling
injury
with
was big. I mean,
ah,
Joe Mixon absolutely shredded the Colts in week 1. Like, I
and
mean, he is a great fit for that
that
team.
is an offense that needs a stabilized running game. You saw it last year with Devin Singletary. Like,
Mhm.
they run the ball a lot. And when they have a guy who's running the ball consistently and running the ball consistently well, it sets up so much for them in the passing game. So the Bills will have their hands full. I don't wish injuries upon anyone, but since he's already injured, I'm hoping that Joe Mixon maybe is out one more week and the Buffalo Bills do not have to face him. All right. We will be back Sunday, 8 a.m. for a pregame show right here on the Cover One Sports Network. We get a little 1 p.m. reprieve as the Bills take on the Texans, the weirdest scheduling in all of the NFL season, putting this game on at 1 p.m. Catch all the great offerings this week. Under review, disguised coverage tomorrow, film room, Cover One Buffalo on Wednesday. And then, like I said, we will be back on Sunday. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. We greatly appreciate it. A like really helps us with the algorithm. A subscribe really goes a long way to helping all of the Cover One shows and all the great work that these guys put in here at the network. And a share. If there's any way that we're going to grow this show, it's with your guys' help. Clicking that share button, sending it to a friend, a family member, somebody you think would enjoy sitting down and doing these therapy sessions with us or our Victory Mondays with us here at the Air Raid Hour. Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
No, as always, it is good to talk to you and to everyone in the comments section after a tough loss. Our therapy sessions always do make me feel a little better after this. But like I said in the beginning, I didn't feel as bad maybe as I had in past years after games, because this is a Ravens team that is a Super Bowl caliber team with Derrick Henry in the mix now. And that defense was, like I said in the pregame, better than maybe the statistics had shown through the first 3 weeks. So again, tough match. Going to be a lot of those, hopefully for the Bills and Lamar and Pat Mahomes. And there's a lot of these good games, and the Bills will be on the winning side of some of these as well. But we'll see you guys Sunday, and hopefully the Titans can finish the job here tonight and take care of the Dolphins.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!